November, it is here, along with daylight savings time. Coming up this weekend, we set our clocks back 1 hour across most of the country. And a busy month ahead with Election Day, Veterans Day, and Thanksgiving. Tomorrow, it's National Bison Day, and November 4th, Monday, King Tut Day. Looking at the weather across the country this afternoon, we've got a cold front moving through the northeastern U.S. Very warm weather ahead of that, temperatures close to 80 degrees from Boston down into Virginia. Behind it, some very cold air, temperatures in the 30s and 40s in the Great Lakes. That's all being driven by this large area of high pressure across the Midwest. In Texas, the tail end of the front running from about Lufkin to Del Rio. Some return flow starting to set up in West Texas, and we will see that increase dramatically going into the weekend with the appearance of severe weather. And another strong frontal system heading into the Pacific Northwest, an endless barrage of weather heading into that part of the country. This one bringing winter storms to parts of the Cascades and quite a bit of rain along the coast. Checking out the conditions at jet stream level, things are very active in the northern Pacific. These winds right here, south of the Aleutians, flowing about 160 to 170 knots. That's about 200 miles an hour. So if you were flying directly westward, you would have a 200-mile-an-hour headwind. Some of that wind is flowing down the Pacific coast, just off of Washington. The pattern's also carving out this deep trough extending from British Columbia into Northern California. Across the rest of the country, zonal flow from the western U.S. into the Atlantic, and the appearance of that Hudson Bay vortex displaced a little bit to the east into the Labrador Sea, but still bringing that northwesterly flow into Quebec, Ontario, and the northeastern U.S. And let's take a quick look what's going on around the country. Front sweeping through the northeastern U.S. right through here. It is a dry front, can barely pick out that front at all, but back behind it, the classic cold air advection pattern. Open cell cumulus and some of it even closed cell, and some lake effect convection. You can see that on the lee side of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. Upper 70s and low 80s along that frontal boundary, but as you go to the west, much colder in the Allegheny region with 40s in Michigan and the upper Great Lakes. Stagnant weather prevails in the southeastern U.S., the tail end of the front moving through the Blue Ridge Mountains and into Alabama and Mississippi. Ahead of it, a tropical air mass in place, some showers along the east coast of Florida, but otherwise not really a whole lot going on. In the southern plains, here is where the weather is fixing to change. Highs today, a little bit cooler, looking at 84 to 88 degrees in the south part of the state. The front pretty much right in the center of Texas, and up to the north, a little bit cooler. But this is where that tropical moisture is starting to set up in the Rio Grande Valley. That is going to be flowing north. Let me just show that to you really quick. Yeah, this is the integrated vapor transport you see in the Rio Grande Valley right there, about 400 for those values. Then overnight, it really starts picking up to 500. This is the start of a low-level jet. And by tomorrow afternoon, the moisture advection in full swing. And as we go into the weekend, that plume really starts setting up. The precipitable water values come up to about 1.5 inches all the way to Illinois by Monday. And you can see that vast river of air coming up from the western Gulf into the Great Lakes area by Monday and Tuesday. And finally, things start clearing out by Wednesday, and we return to square one. This is about where we're at today. So it's kind of on a 4-day cycle at this time, maybe 4 to 5 days. And 'tis the season. We're not talking about Christmas and the early displays at Lowe's and that kind of thing. We're talking about the low-level jet and the appearance of cool season severe weather. So here's the jet setting up early tomorrow, 30 knots from Del Rio up to Childress. And that continues building north going into Sunday. We have a 55-knot jet across southwestern Oklahoma overnight early Sunday, and 50 to 55 up to St. Louis. Then we go into Monday. We're setting up for another potential severe weather episode, 50 to 60 knots all the way into Illinois. So, of course, this will bear watching. And, of course, the upper air energy. We do get a lot of requests for this chart. This is the Q vectors. The red tends to correspond to upward vertical motion. So what do we have going into tomorrow? A little bit of lift starting to set up around the Four Corners area early on Saturday, moving out onto the plains, but nothing really definitive. But we really don't need a whole lot of upper-level energy to get thunderstorms going. We just need boundaries, moisture, and instability. So by afternoon, a little bit of lift coming out into the West Texas area. So maybe some potential for severe weather there. And then we've got a deeper trough in the southwestern U.S. coming out for Sunday. So by mid-afternoon, we're looking at something like this. Negative tilt trough rotating into Texas. More dynamics well out to the west, and that will feed what's coming into the Midwest and the lower plains for Monday and Tuesday. So kind of a succession of spokes around a bicycle, upper-level energy, rotating northeast into the central U.S. So that's kind of the way things look. One big whammy coming out for early Tuesday into Illinois, and then things start clearing out. But here's the second shot for the following weekend. That digs a little bit as a closed low and then pretty much ejects northeast into the central plains for Friday and Saturday. So now you've got a better idea of what's coming into the Great Plains over the next few days. Starting out today, your first day of thunderstorms, that's going to focus on Clovis, Roswell, Hobbs, Leveland, Seminole. A few thunderstorms popping up as we get maximum heating. Nothing going on right now, but the Davis Mountains already starting to fire there, and we could see more development as the afternoon goes on. Maybe a few specks of cumulus starting to show up out there around Artesia. I think I saw something right in here. Oh, that was nothing. But a few towers going up around Ruidoso. And we take a look a little bit further to the southeast. This is the air mass around Abilene. We can actually pick out the tail end of that front. See right in here? A distinct difference between these transverse bands, a rather stable air mass across the Caprock region, down to the south, more unstable, more vertical growth in those cumulus elements. So you take another look right there. This may be some convection, maybe about to form. That's outside of the forecast area for those storms. But, if I was chasing, I would take a closer look at that, maybe around San Angelo, further down towards Fredericksburg. And there's that other convection out to the west over the Davis Mountains, south of, I guess that would be Toyah and Kent. That area tends to fire quite often during severe weather events in West Texas. And whenever you take a peek at that satellite image, you always want to refer back to the surface chart. This is basically the same area. And we do pick up that frontal boundary right in this area there. 80s south of that boundary, 84 over 63. Yeah, that's a tropical air mass for sure. Much cooler to the north. Around Abilene, Breckenridge, Mineral Wells, temperatures in the 60s. The dew point, that's still a little bit elevated. Any sign of the dry line? Not really. That moisture is pushed all the way to the mountains. I could probably put a dry line way back here, but really not enough data to support that. Continuing our tour of weather across the Great Plains, moving up north, a weak frontal system in South Dakota, the front's looking about like that, and a little area of elevated precip around Fargo and western Minnesota. Some 60s starting to reach into the central Dakotas, especially around Yankton and Mitchell. It remains pretty cold up in North Dakota, highs today only about 39 at Bismarck. And we will be seeing a big cool down tonight across the high plains. Lows will be in the 20s from Montana, Wyoming, into the western Dakotas, and into northeastern Nebraska. Denver down to 32 degrees tonight. In the southwestern U.S., cooler across the southwestern deserts. Highs today at Phoenix only 83, 82 at Tucson. The dew point's extremely low. Let's take a look at that. Phoenix, 15-degree dew point. Grand Canyon, 1. Farmington, New Mexico, 8 degrees. That is a sign that we've brought down either some polar air from up there in western Canada or some upper-level air which has arrived at the surface through subsidence, and it could very well be a combination of both of those. As a result, we will have some cold overnight lows down to 56 at Phoenix, 26 at Flagstaff, and 23 at Gallup. Some signs of strong upper-level flow definitely evident. Numerous bands of cirrus across California, Arizona, and Utah. Clear evidence of strong upper-level flow. Earlier this morning, there were freeze warnings across parts of the Mojave Desert into the Carrizo Plain around Paso Robles. We do have a winter weather advisory late tonight and early Saturday for the eastern Sierras up to Lake Tahoe and north to Lassen Peak. Snow levels will be about 5,000 feet. 1 to 4 inches of snow are possible in the lower elevations, with up to 9 inches near the summits and passes. Winds could gust up to 50 miles an hour over the ridges, and offshore we've got gale warnings from the Channel Islands up to Point Arena due to winds up to 40 miles an hour and seas 10 to 14 feet. And in the northwestern U.S., another frontal system moving into Oregon and Washington. Let's take a look at that on the water vapor imagery that always shows more detail. And there it is. This probably corresponds to the warm conveyor belt, the center of the low pressure area, possibly around Yakima. That's probably about where the maximum curvature is, maximum rotation. Winter storm warning overnight in the far northern Cascades, right up in here. Above 3,500 feet, they're expecting 7 to 15 inches of snow in the Okanogan-Wenatchee National Forest. In Oregon, winter storm warning expiring this evening in the southern Oregon Cascades from Bachelor Mountain to Crater Lake, 4 to 11 inches of heavy wet snow expected there. And the Cascades, further north under a winter weather advisory to this evening, above 4,000 feet, for up to 3 inches of snow. In Washington, it continues all night, where 3 to 7 inches of snow are expected. The primary surface low, the main occlusion, still remains offshore, just west of Quileute. Heading north into Alaska, parts of the southern Panhandle and Glacier Bay were under dense fog advisories this morning. Winter weather advisory in the Alaskan interior on the Dalton Highway from the Yukon River to the Brooks Range. They were looking for snow and blowing snow with winds to 50 miles an hour that will be clearing up this evening. Gale warnings all through the northern Gulf of Alaska into the Bering Sea and into Norton Sound. The next big atmospheric river coming up Tuesday that will churn mostly through the northern Gulf of Alaska, but the Kenai Peninsula will be affected, along with Anchorage and Valdez. And that'll move into southeastern Alaska Tuesday night with another surge coming in for Wednesday and another surge for Thursday night. That one should hit British Columbia pretty hard, mostly on the central coast. Then we turn our attention to the tropics. Things are quiet today, but a few areas of concern out around Puerto Rico, where they've had some very heavy rain this week, and of course off of Nicaragua. Hurricane season does not end until around the week of Thanksgiving. For example, Hurricane Kate back in 1985 hit near Panama City as a Category 2 storm, and we had Hurricane Mitch in 1998, which made landfall near Naples. The National Hurricane Center has a 70% chance of formation in the Western Caribbean. Here's a quick look at the GFS forecast, bringing some sort of tropical cyclone into Cuba by Tuesday and then into the Central Gulf as a low-end hurricane by late next week. This is very tentative and subject to change. The ECMWF had a similar track, but a little bit further to the south. Neither of the models bringing landfall into the U.S. Of course, this other weaker storm out there in the Bahamas, that could be a factor for the Florida Keys or maybe for Florida itself, but not much development indicated. All right, let's take a look at that forecast, looking at the GFS model and my overprint of the frontal boundaries. The big story, of course, is that frontal system heading into the northwestern U.S. that will move rapidly into the Great Basin area overnight. For tomorrow afternoon, the warm advection really takes force in the central U.S. Precipitable water surges up to 1.75 inches Houston to Oklahoma City, up to 1.5 from Childress to Midland, and up to 1 inch all the way to Nebraska. That will produce a lot of precipitation in the central part of the Great Plains. In the northeast, more cold air on its way down. It will be a cold night tomorrow night, lows dropping into the 20s with 30s along the coast. In the western U.S., rain and snow showers in the higher elevations in the Sierras, the Great Basin, Idaho, and the Cascades as a weak atmospheric river moves onto the northwest coast. Then we go into Sunday, and of course, a very slow displacement of that large area of warm advection into the lower plains and the Mississippi River Valley. We start to see 80s popping up in Paducah and Memphis, Nashville, as that warm air advection gets started. Precipitable water, 1.5 inch from Dallas to the Quad Cities. So quite a bit of precipitation all around the central U.S. A slight risk of severe storms across a broad area extending from central Kansas into northwest Texas, basically this area right there. The exact setup, not clear at this time, but all hazards are possible, including tornadoes. The strongly sheared environment and destabilization of the air mass does support a slight risk at this time. And in the western U.S., you can see this vast area of thermal troughing. The thermal trough pretty much right along that axis, and anywhere along it, cold advection filtering down into the Rockies and the Intermountain region. A big cool down for parts of Utah, the Four Corners, highs 44 degrees at Salt Lake City, and some of those rain showers and snow showers spreading into Arizona. Then we go into Monday. There's the setup for Monday afternoon, cold advection into the high plains and all the way into West Texas. Let's start out working from east to west. Warm advection from the Ohio River Valley into the Mississippi River Valley, and an MCS from around the Quad Cities to Fort Smith. Precipitable water, 1.5 inch all the way from Dallas to Michigan. So supporting yet another day of rain, thunderstorms, and the possibility of severe weather. Now we're starting to get that cold air flowing into the Central Plains, highs 42 degrees at Denver, 40s from Fargo to North Platte and Dalhart, continued cold in Wyoming and Colorado, widespread 30s in the mountain valleys. And we move out west. Here comes another surge of cold air, combined with an atmospheric river, which is crashing onto the coast of British Columbia, IVT values about 800, and that will flow into the Seattle area. So continued rain through the evening. Further south, some drying through the Great Basin area, And down to the south, Arizona. Some cold overnight lows down to 51 at Phoenix, 38 at Tucson, 22 at Show Low, and 17 at Flagstaff. Then for Tuesday, rains moving into the Great Lakes area, especially Chicago and St. Louis and down the Mississippi River Valley, and that moves eastward into Ohio and lower Ontario for late Tuesday. 1 to 1.5 inch precipitable waters from the central Gulf Coast all the way into New York and Pennsylvania. Cold air in the process of modifying in the central U.S., highs ranging from the 50s up north to the 60s down south. And in the west, snow showers all through the northern Rockies and Cascades, with this next frontal system building into the Four Corners area for Wednesday. This will be the coldest day of the week in the central Rockies. We're looking for highs of around 40 in North Dakota, 39 at Denver, and on Interstate 80 in Wyoming, 28 for an afternoon high at Rawlins, and 29 at Rock Springs, 33 for Cheyenne. And overnight, very cold, down to 22 at Denver and Pueblo, down to 15 at Butte, and single digits in Yellowstone National Park. Snow showers continuing, and then kind of a moderating trend in the Rockies as we go into Friday. And you can just follow along your favorite area. We will probably see another severe weather outbreak Friday and Saturday in the central U.S., and then just rain for the northeastern U.S. for Sunday, although that is pretty far away. And yet another weather system moving into the northwestern U.S. for Sunday, November 10th. And I think that is probably a good place to stop. Remember, daylight savings time ends late Saturday night, and we lose an hour of daylight. Many of us dislike that twice-annual ritual of going through the house messing with all the clocks, wondering what the actual benefits are. The original idea was to save energy, but does it? Perhaps it just prolongs our days, encouraging going out and spending money. But one thing is certain, a lot of people seem to hate daylight savings time. If that's true, why don't our lawmakers address it? Why do we not go on year-round daylight time? Some of the things I wonder there. Perhaps it's this back-and-forth practice that's tangled itself in the fabric of our society, a relic we maintain simply because it's what we've always done. What do you think? I'm curious. Post in the comments and let us know. Anyway, we'll be back again on Monday for the supporters and on Wednesday for everybody else. Remember, you can support us on Patreon, or you can head to weathergraphics.com, pick up a forecasting tool or a book in my shop, all created by me, and all of that helps support this program. And with that, I hope you all have a great weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.